Right now, as you watch this video, somewhere between 2 and 8% of your DNA is not fully human. It belongs to a species that walked this earth 400,000 years before the first pyramid was built. A species that wrestled cave lions with their bare hands, that planned ahead for winter, that buried their dead with flowers, that made jewelry from eagle talons 130,000 years ago. A species that we called primitive for 150 years, that we drew as hunched, grunting, barely alive. Science just proved we were completely wrong. Neanderthals weren't primitive. They were extraordinary, and they didn't disappear. They became us. Stay until the end of this video, because the last discovery we're going to talk about, published just days ago in 2026, changes everything you thought you knew about what it means to be human. Let's go back, all the way back, 400,000 years ago. Europe is mostly ice. Temperatures regularly drop to -30. The megafauna that walk these landscapes, woolly mammoths, cave lions, woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears weighing 900 kilograms, would kill any modern animal we know today. And living right in the middle of all of this, thriving, are the Neanderthals. They looked similar to us. Upright, 2 arms, 2 legs, a face you would recognize as human, but different in ways that matter. Their skulls had a thick, shelf-like brow ridge, not decorative, but structural, like a built-in helmet for a life of constant physical impact. Their noses were enormous, wide, projecting forward, an evolutionary masterpiece for warming and humidifying freezing Arctic air before it could damage their lungs. They were stocky, compact, built like a living tank, optimized for cold climates and brute force survival. Every inch of fat on their body was retained heat. Every extra millimeter of bone was structural reinforcement. And here is the fact that has haunted scientists for decades. Their brains were the same size as ours, or in some cases, larger. We spent 150 years calling them dim-witted, calling them primitive, calling them evolutionary failures who lost a competition with smarter humans. But the numbers on brain volume, those were never on our side. So what was actually going on? That's what the last decade of science has been trying to answer. And the answers are extraordinary. Let's talk about the part that genuinely should terrify you. The physical power of a Neanderthal. The first evidence comes from their bones. Not the shape of the bones. Neanderthal long bones. The femur, the humerus, had dramatically thicker cortical bone than modern humans. Cortical bone is the dense outer shell of bone that determines how much force a bone can handle without fracturing. In Neanderthals, this layer was substantially thicker, not because they were big, but because their bodies needed it. Their muscles were generating forces that modern human bone would simply not survive. The second evidence is in their hands. Studies of Neanderthal finger and wrist bones show that their grip was fundamentally different from ours. Wider hands, thicker fingers, massive hand musculature, built for what scientists call a power grip. Squeezing, crushing, holding with tremendous force. Their shorter, lower arm bones, The radius and ulna gave them a mechanical biomechanical advantage in pulling and pushing. Think of it like a shorter lever arm on a medieval siege weapon. Less extension, more raw torque. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. A 2025 study published in Nature Communications found that some Neanderthals carried a mutation in a gene called AMPD1, a gene that regulates muscle energy efficiency. The Neanderthal version of this gene showed 25% lower efficiency in lab conditions. In engineered mice, the difference widened to an 80% reduction. Think about what this means. Even with a muscle gene that was 25% less efficient, they were still the most physically dominant humans who ever lived. Imagine the ones with the fully powered version. Modern humans evolved differently. We traded peak power for something else. Endurance. Long distance running. The ability to chase prey for hours across open savanna. A Neanderthal could overpower us in seconds. But we could run them into the ground. We were different tools shaped by different environments for different kinds of survival. For decades, the story we told ourselves was this: Neanderthals were bad hunters, clumsy, reactive. They waited for animals to die of other causes and scavenged the leftovers. They couldn't plan. They couldn't coordinate. They couldn't compete with clever modern humans who invented better weapons and better strategies. That story is completely dead. The archaeological evidence now paints something radically different. Neanderthals were not opportunists. They were strategic predators who used landscape, group coordination, and long-term planning to hunt prey that would be almost impossible for a lone individual to kill. They also hunted animals that had no business being hunted. A 48,000-year-old cave lion skeleton found in Siegsdorf, Germany, shows a clear puncture wound on one rib, the mark of a wooden spear, plus multiple cut marks across other bones. Cave lions were apex predators twice the size of modern African lions. Neanderthals didn't avoid them. They hunted them. And then there's what they did after the hunt. This is the discovery that, to me, is the most stunning of all. Winter food storage. Long-term resource planning. Thinking months into the future about survival. This is not primitive behavior. This is intelligence. This is strategy. This is what kept them alive for 400,000 years. And their weapons? Wooden spears, yes, but not simple pointed sticks. Shaped, balanced, hardened. There is also evidence of stone-tipped spears hafted with multi-component adhesive. In 2024, NYU researchers confirmed that Neanderthals created complex stone tools held together by a manufactured adhesive, the earliest known complex adhesive in Europe. So we've established that Neanderthals were physically dominant, strategically intelligent hunters. But what was their actual daily life like? What went on inside a Neanderthal community? They lived in small family groups, probably 10 to 30 individuals, extended family units, multi-generational. They occupied caves in winter, where they organized their living spaces, sleeping areas, food preparation zones, hearths. Scientists have found evidence of deliberate interior arrangement. They weren't just sleeping in holes. They were creating homes. Fire was central to everything. Cooking, Warmth, light, safety. Evidence shows they were reliably making fire, not just opportunistically using naturally occurring fire, but generating it on demand. They ate a remarkable variety of food: big game, mammoth, bison, horse, deer, rhinoceros, but also rabbits, freshwater turtles, seafood along coastlines. Analysis of bones from Abric Pizarro in Spain, dating to 65,000,100,000 years ago, shows they were opportunistic and flexible, hunting whatever the environment offered most efficiently. They used plants, not just as food, as medicine. And at Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, one of the most debated discoveries in paleoanthropology, a Neanderthal burial was found surrounded by pollen from 8 species of flowering plants, including yarrow, ephedra, and hollyhock. If deliberate, this means Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers over 60,000 years ago. The debate continues. But something was happening there that we have never fully explained. They cared for their injured. Skeletal remains show healed fractures, complex injuries that could only have healed with rest, protection, and feeding by others. These individuals survived because someone took care of them. That is empathy. That is community. Here is the question that separates humans from everything else on this planet. Do you think in symbols? Can you attach meaning to an object beyond its physical function? Can you wear a necklace not because it keeps you warm, but because it says something about who you are? For 150 years, scientists said Neanderthals could not do this. Symbolic thought, we said, was uniquely ours, the thing that made Homo sapiens special. And then the evidence started accumulating. And now, in 2026, the answer is clear. They wore feathers. At sites in Gibraltar and Italy, bird bones show cut marks specifically on the wing bones, the part that carries the long display feathers. They weren't eating the birds. They were harvesting the feathers, almost certainly for decoration. Ceremonial headdresses, body adornment, symbols of status or identity. They engraved geometric patterns on cave walls and bones. Abstract crosshatch patterns, hashtag-like marks. These are not accidental scratches. These are deliberate, symbolic marks. Their vocal tracts and auditory pathways were anatomically similar to ours. The debate continues, but every year, the evidence tips further toward language. But let's be honest, Neanderthal life was not gentle. It was brutal, dangerous, and increasingly desperate as their numbers declined. The injuries found on Neanderthal skeletons are staggering. Fractures across the upper body, ribs, arms, skulls, patterns that look eerily similar to the injury profiles of modern rodeo riders. People who get close to large, panicking animals. People who wrestle prey at close range. These were not injuries from falls. These were injuries from hunting at uncomfortably close quarters. And there is evidence of something darker still. This discovery paints a harder, more honest picture of Neanderthal life at the edge. These were not peaceful, noble savages. They were beings under enormous pressure. Shrinking populations, fragmenting territories, competing for resources. And under that pressure, They did what many species do. They survived by whatever means necessary. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals vanished from the fossil record. After 400,000 years of survival, through ice ages, volcanic winters, the expansion and contraction of entire ecosystems, they were gone. For 150 years, the answer seemed obvious. Modern humans arrived from Africa, and we won. We outcompeted them. We outhunted them. We were smarter, more social, better armed. We outright replaced them. But genetics has been quietly dismantling that story, piece by piece. Dr. Akey said something that stopped me in my tracks when I read it. He said, "I don't like to say extinction, because I think Neanderthals were largely absorbed." Absorbed? Not wiped out? Not defeated? Absorbed. A 2025 mathematical model published in Scientific Reports by researchers at the University of Rome Tor Vergata modeled exactly how this could have happened. No battle required, no genocide, no disease. Just repeated small waves of modern humans moving into Neanderthal territory, interbreeding generation by generation, diluting the Neanderthal gene pool across 10,000 to 30,000 years. The math shows this alone is sufficient to explain their disappearance from the fossil record. And into those small, isolated, genetically weakened groups, modern humans arrived, not as conquerors necessarily, but as a larger, more connected, more genetically diverse population. And over thousands of years, their genes, our genes, simply became dominant. The Neanderthals didn't lose a war. They lost a numbered, outbred, slowly, generation by generation, their identity dissolved into ours. But here's the thing. They didn't disappear. They live inside us. The Neanderthals are not gone. They are distributed, fragmented across 8 billion people, in small pieces in each of us, quietly doing what they always did, helping us survive. Here's what I want you to walk away with. Neanderthals were not failures. They were not warnings about what happens when evolution goes wrong. They were extraordinary human beings who survived on this planet for 400,000 years, 10 times longer than recorded human history, using intelligence, empathy, planning, community, and raw physical power that we have never since seen on this earth. They hunted cave lions and woolly mammoths. They stored food for winter. They healed their injured. They buried their dead. They made jewelry. They painted on cave walls. They may have spoken. They cared. And in their final act, in the slow twilight of their time, they merged with us. They gave us their cold weather adaptations, their immune system knowledge, their strength, their resilience. Every time a human being survives something they shouldn't have survived, every time we pull through the cold, the impossible, the overwhelming, there is something ancient in that, something that remembers 400,000 years of survival written into bone and blood. Maybe the Neanderthals never really left. Maybe they're still surviving. In us, through us, as us. That is the most human story I have ever heard. If this changed how you see human history, drop a comment. Share this with someone who would never expect to care about a 40,000-year-old mystery. And if you want to go deeper, the next video on early human species is right here. I'll see you there.